Let's continue the countdown to Choose Your Legend season, but this time with my favorite Choose Your Legends 5 hero, Brave Marianne. Marianne is by far the most unique of the CYL batch, but with that uniqueness has come a few problems that have held her back. So let's quickly go over Marianne's kit and get an idea of her strengths and weaknesses. Marianne's preference weapon, Phantasm Tome, essentially has 4 effects. You get speed plus 3, you get an inflict speed and resistance minus 6 on the foe, you get a low speed and resistance effect, and then you get 70% damage reduction against the foe's first attack if she initiates combat, which is really solid honestly. It allows Marianne to really engage to a lot of units and not have to worry about dying, which is really good. But when we're talking about the thing that really makes her unique, it has to be her preference special, Requiem Dance. What this essentially does is after combat, if it's fully charged, she gives out a dance effect to the unit with the highest HP within 2 spaces that has already acted, and then it inflicts a gravity effect on it. Why this is so unique is because it allows Marianne to be a dancer without having to use her assist skill, which means she can be danced herself, and it also allows her to be a more offensive dancer, which is really cool because it can allow her to jump in with Wings of Mercy, kill something, and then keep the Gale Force train going. Now there is a small downside with inflicting gravity on the ally, but honestly it's not the biggest deal, though I have seen people complain about it for sure. Okay, let's jump into the tier list, and let's start with that gravity effect and a way to actually fix it. I don't think it's the biggest deal, it doesn't really bother me, but I have thought about ways to make it a little bit less of a problem. And I think one way you could do that is Pathfinder. We're gonna put it down in C tier because I don't think it's the biggest effect she could get, but I could see after her special proccing, maybe she gives herself Pathfinder, and then that way the unit could move through her and essentially have 2 spaces of movement at the same time, even though they do have gravity on them. So I think that is one way to fix that. It would give Marianne some kind of unique functionality in SD, as having more Pathfinder is always strong, and if it actually gave Pathfinder to the person she danced as well, it could be pretty good. I don't think it's the most amazing effect, and I don't think we should really be focusing on fixing that gravity effect in her Refine, because she does have so many other things she do want to fix, but I think it is a good option. Now obviously the other thing Marianne really needs is some bonus stats, so we're going to put that down in B tier. It's a typical thing you will see in pretty much every Refine, and Marianne could always use more. Not only would it allow her to have more firepower, but it also give her more speed, which allows her to double, and also get past speed based damage reduction, so I definitely think that is a good choice, even though attack speed unity in her base kit is really solid right now because of Legendary Robin. Now the other thing that we have to talk about Marianne, one of her bigger problems, is that she doesn't have slaying built into her weapon. What that means is that it's sometimes difficult to proc that 3 cooldown special reliably, as she is a bit weak to guard. And so one of the effects she could get to kind of fix this problem is a breath effect. Essentially she could get special acceleration in her weapon. I'm going to put that in A tier, and what that would essentially allow her to do is have an easier time getting to that 3 cooldown, right? You run Times Pulse on her in her C slot, and then you hit 1 time, and then it should be procced in most situations. Though guard could slow it down, but a breath effect could be really good, especially if she does get slaying in her weapon, because it could allow her to get past guard with Times Pulse, which would be really nice. So I think this could be a very solid effect on Marianne, and it is something pretty realistic to see on her, as it has become a lot more common on Refines. Speaking of effects that really Marianne does want to fix that special problem, one of the biggest ones has to be Tempo. Tempo is just that effect that allows her to have the anti-guard and also stops the special acceleration of the foe, and it's really pivotal for Marianne. I think it's probably one of the best effects she can get in the entire game in this Refine, so I'm really looking for this effect. So for Tempo, I'm going to put it in S tier, and you'll figure out why in a second, because we're going to go right into the next one that I think is slightly better, and that's going to be an S+, and that's Anti-Guard. Now Anti-Guard is half of Tempo, and I think I've talked about this in a ton of other videos, but Tempo takes up a lot of budget of your weapon, unless you're an infantry beast unit, right? And so just having the anti-guard is all Marianne really needs. She's not really too scared of accelerating the foe specials. She just needs the anti-guard so that she can be consistent with her special proccing and make sure she can get those dances off. So I think anti-guard is one of the biggest effects we want to see in Brave Marianne's weapon. It's probably the top effect, or second top effect you could really see. So I'm hoping that shows up for her, but we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of other effects, of course, it has to be Slaying, like I mentioned earlier. Slaying is another one of the biggest effects we want to see on Brave Marianne. It just fixes the special cooldown problem she has with her preference special right now. Just having Slaying makes it so that when you have Times Pulse, it only has 1 cooldown. And if you have Anti-Guard, it pretty much makes it so that you always proc that special, which makes Marianne much more consistent. So it pretty much fixes that entire situation if she can get Anti-Guard and Slaying. So those 2 effects we desperately want to see on Brave Marianne. We'll all just be praying to IS that they do give her those 2 effects. Now let's talk about some other effects that really Marianne would like to have, and one of the things that we have to consider is that Brave Marianne special does not do damage. Now this wasn't the biggest deal back in the day, as Marianne had that like premium stat line where she could kill a lot of things, and she still can kill a lot of things nowadays, but she does struggle a bit against all those units with a ton of damage reduction. And so we definitely need a way to give Marianne some more firepower. And so one of the effects she could definitely get is true damage based off her attack. I think this is one of the weaker effects she could get, but I could definitely see it showing up and still being pretty solid. Marianne has a respectable attack stat, even though she doesn't really get those stats from her weapon itself. Even so, just getting some extra damage would definitely help Marianne kill some more things. But if we're talking about some really unique ways to get Marianne some firepower, I think one of the cooler effects she could get is actually an ice mirror effect like Fjorm has. Because we have to remember, Marianne gets 70% damage reduction, right? So if she's able to attack into a foe, then have an ice mirror effect based off 70% of the damage she would have taken, that's a lot of damage. That could definitely allow Marianne to hit really, really hard and explode some things. So I think this would be one of the more cool effects she get. I don't think it's like completely broken, but it's definitely cool, so I'm gonna put it down in A tier. Now when it comes to one of the other effects I think she could really get is speed-based true damage. I'm gonna put this one up in S. Marianne is a very fast unit, so being able to go in and just get like 10 to 20% speed-based true damage would be massive. It would allow her to hit a lot harder. We've seen this on something like Legendary Yuri or even Legendary Hinoka recently. It's a ton of free damage, and it could really allow like Marianne to secure some more kills and even act as a more powerful nuke. Now let's go back to some more foundational effects Marianne could really use to fix some of her problems. Now once again, Marianne does have that gravity effect on her dance. It's not the biggest deal, but one way you could fix it in a really cool way in my opinion is the formation buff like Peony has on her dance. What this essentially would allow her to do is right after she does the dance on the unit, they would gain this and then they'd be much more mobile as they can teleport around Marianne or other allies, allowing them to just kind of get in there, right? Because typically Marianne is run on a Gale Force team, and sometimes you do need that extra room to like fit the unit exactly where you want them. So I think this could be another great option. Another cool option could be Canto 1. I'm gonna put this also in B tier. Canto 1 can be really good because sometimes Marianne comes in and she like teleports in behind your Gale Force initiator, and then she kind of like takes up the area you want to have somebody else Wings of Mercy in, either being another dancer or a Gale Forcer, or maybe you just need room like in that area. So I think Canto 1 could be really nice, and it could also allow her to be more deadly as a nuke in other game modes because it could make her much more mobile. She would be able to essentially teleport in with like something like Brow Catcher, kill something, and then also cancel out. So I think that would be really, really strong and a nice effect to give to Marianne. Some other cool stat buffing options for Marianne could be a Feud effect. Feud's value has definitely jumped up. I don't think this will be broken on Marianne. It's definitely not one of the effects I'm necessarily looking for, but it could be nice. So I'm gonna put this one in B tier. It'd be a nice counter to Fallen Maria, and we could always use more of that, right? Now the other thing we need to talk about Marianne, of course, is that typically as a Gale Force unit, her B slot is pretty full. You really do want like a null follow-up effect there so she can double, but you also want Wings of Mercy so she can teleport. So I think one of the more unique and cool effects Marianne could get is the Fallen Lilith Warp effect, where she can teleport within 2 spaces of her support partner. I'm gonna put this one in A tier. What this essentially could allow you to do is you could like ally support Marianne with your Gale Force initiator, and then she could just teleport in at any time and then keep the Gale Force train going, even if they like fail to proc Gale Force. I think this would be a really cool effect, and it would also make Marianne much more deadly in summoner duels, as you can essentially have this on like one of your initiating units or one of your tanks or something, and then Marianne can just teleport across the map and destroy something, and then dance that unit at the same time. So I think this could be a really, really cool and interesting effect. Now I'm not necessarily sure if it's as powerful as Wings of Mercy, because it would kind of limit Marianne's teleportation only to her support partner, but even so I think it could be a great effect. Speaking of Wings of Mercy, let's go all the way up to S+ tier and put in Wings of Mercy 4, because I think this could be one of the best effects Marianne could get. Essentially what this would do is open up her B slot so that she can run some other kind of effect there, like no follow-up or something else, right? Like you don't necessarily have to run no follow-up, but you could just having an open B slot makes a unit so much more versatile and allows you to run so many different builds. It could even let you run tempo if she doesn't get that in a refine. So I think having Wings of Mercy 4 would be absolutely massive, especially because it gives that extra layer of teleportation, right? You get that larger warp radius, and you also get the additional warp as well. So it's just a very powerful skill Marianne could get, and I think it could really solidify her as a very unique unit in the entire game, which would be really cool. Now speaking of B slots, the other thing Marianne really does need is null follow-up. We're gonna put this up in S tier. Getting offensive null follow-up would be like the minimum I want to see for Marianne, as it does open up the B slot, but getting full null follow-up actually is pretty good on Marianne as well, because she has that 70% damage reduction. So having full null follow-up would essentially allow her to go in, survive the hit, and then even if she doesn't kill the opponent, they wouldn't be able to double her, and so she could probably be pretty tanky with that. So I think this is actually a very solid effect and could really help Marianne a ton. So I do hope that maybe she gets Snowfall or Wings of Mercy or Temper, like one of those effects hopefully, so we can have that open B slot. Now let's talk about 2 more effects that I think Marianne just wants, once again to help her with that dancing special, and that is Time's Pulse or the special jump effect that Duo Ike has, right? So both of these are S tier effects in my opinion. Essentially what this will do is just allow Marianne to have more flexibility with her special, and it can open up her C slot as well, right? If you don't have to run Time's Pulse in her C slot because of either having one of these 2 effects, you could run something like Attack Speed Oath, which just gives her more stats, which gives her more firepower, right? Which just lets her kill things. So I think having that open C slot is always nice, so having either of these 2 effects be really good. Now when it comes to Duo Ike's effect in particular, it does allow her to get around guard really easy as well, so I think that is the better of the 2, but it hasn't been given out too much, right? We've kind of seen it on Bravimon, but with like a slaying condition, and then we have seen it on like Duo Ike and some of the Tikis as well. Okay, I saved the 2 craziest effects for last. I think all these other effects are very solid and could help Marianne at a foundational level, but if we're talking about some effects that could really like break Marianne in my opinion, one of them has to be damage reduction halving. We've seen this on Magical No Follow-Up, and I think Magic No Follow-Up is an absolutely amazing skill to have on Brave Marianne right now, especially if she does get Wings of Mercy in her Refine. It's just super, super good. So I'm going to put this at the top of S+ tier. I think this would be pretty insane to get, especially because it would stack with Magic No Follow-Up. So essentially you could get like 70%, I think, damage reduction piercing on every single hit, which would be ridiculous, and it would allow Marianne to be a very powerful nuke who's also very versatile. But I think one of the cooler effects Marianne could get that could really like just change her entire playstyle would be a self-refresh. That's right. I want to see Brave Marianne go over and mug Elgard and get that self-Gale Force built into her kit. Now the way I think this would work is essentially she would get an effect where when her special procs, she not only dances the unit with the highest HP within 2 spaces, but she also dances herself. And I think this would be the coolest effect ever pretty much. It would make Marianne very, very unique, and it would allow her to do all kinds of cool things. Now, obviously, there would have to be a limit on it, right? Like, it would only be like maybe once per map, or like once per like turn, or something like that. So we can't have Marianne taking infinite turns. But even so, like allowing her to go in, kill something, dance an ally and herself would just allow her to be really good in a ton of different game modes. She would be automatically one of the better units in hit and run strategies. She would be absolutely top tier in Gale Force. And it would allow her to be really strong in summoner duels, as it would allow her to like just jump in, right, kill something, refresh an ally, and keep moving. It would give her so much action economy in SD, which is like one of the bigger factors you have to consider when building a team. So I think it would just absolutely skyrocket Marianne to like one of the better units in the entire game. So I would love to see that. I don't think realistically we will see that, but if it does show up, at least I called it first, right? And with that, my tier list from Brave Marianne is complete with all the effects I think she really does need, or effects that could make her very powerful. But now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of these effects? Which effects do you think Marianne needs the most? And which effects do you think would be the coolest to see on her Refine? Make sure to drop a comment down below letting me know. And as always, I'd love to thank all my members for their constant support. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. This has been Oblivion. I'll catch you later.